Kez Armstrong has been studying kestrels for a number of years as part of her PhD on the Common Kestrel in Ireland. The following talk details the results of this research.
And my background in ecology is a little bit different to some of my peers because I actually got my undergraduate degree in psychology, which my father told me was going to be my backup plan if the animal thing didn't work out. And thankfully, the animal thing is working out because here I am at Queen's several years later doing my PhD. After my master's in animal behaviour, I started working at the Wildfallow Wetlands Trust, Castle Espy, and that's really where I got a love for bird ringing. And I've been a bird ringer now for 6 years, working on various different projects, and that's island-wide, so it's not just in the north. But also because I like to be really busy, I've just taken on the role of the regional representative for the BTO, which is the British Trust for Ornithology for County Down. So yeah, it's definitely a bit of a bird nerd. And I think that's important because we really should start worrying about birds. So we know that bird populations have long been considered to provide a very good indication of the state of the broad state of wildlife. And this is because they have a wide range of habitats and they respond to a lot of environmental pressures that also operate on other groups of wildlife. They also have huge cultural importance and are highly valued as part of our natural environment. And you can see this even in day-to-day life. If you have a bird feeder up in your garden, that's your birds are important and you want to see them every day and you find peace with them every day. But they are declining at a really rapid rate. And in fact, 1 in 8 birds are now said to be threatened with extinction worldwide. And then with raptors, the thing that I'm most interested in, 52% of our raptors worldwide are in decline. And that's 50% of all falcons. And they're actually declining at an alarming rate. So you can see in this graph here that out of the 557 raptor species we have worldwide, 18% of them are now threatened with extinction. 52% of them, as I've already said, have declining trends worldwide. And only 9%, which comes to 49 different species, have an increasing trend. 142 species are listed as least concern by the IUCN Red List, but even out of those least concern species, 38% of them have declining population trends. And it's really worrying because raptors are charismatic species. It's what we're all here for. We're all interested in raptors. We love seeing raptors. It's something that still brings me joy, even though I'm in that position where I kind of know where to find some of them now. And they have a flagship role in a lot of these different habitats. And reducing the abundance of raptors actually can cause a cascade effect throughout our whole ecosystem. And this is something that we can see here in Ireland because we don't actually have a high abundance of avian predators. So we do have a huge influx of things like jackdaws, crows, and magpies, which are predating on other birds and other birds' nests. And according to the Red List assessments, the biggest threats to raptors are habitat destruction, persecution, unintentional and sometimes intentional poisoning, electrocution, and climate change. And they're very difficult to monitor because they do occur at very low population densities. And this makes them really difficult to detect. But to conserve raptors, we really need to gather information on their distribution and their ecological requirements to increase conservation action. And that should lead me nicely, hopefully. Oh, I think I've frozen. To my research, which is on the Common Kestrel, or maybe the not so common kestrel, as I like to think of them. Like many species of raptor, the male and female are slightly different, with the female being a little bit larger than the male. But this is something that you can't really see in the field. I just want to give you a very brief overview on their ID because for asking for sightings, I think it's really important that you can tell the difference between the male and the female. So the male here has a grey head, the cream dots on the chest, the chestnut brown wing, which has black spots, black wing tips, and then the grey tail with the black tip. The female kestrel, slightly different. She has a brown head, the buff streaked chest, the brown bars on the wings, so different to the spots, dark wing tips, and then this brown barred tail with a black tip. But probably the most interesting thing about them is their hover. So this is the one thing that you're going to see most of all whenever you're looking for a kestrel. This amazing ability to hover, they can actually do it by pointing themselves into the wind, which is where they get their old English name of wind hover. And this is so precise that you can see here in slow motion that their head remains completely still. And this is one of their hunting techniques that actually increases their hunting efficiency by 10. So it's just one of the fantastic little elements that they have. It also makes it difficult for us to put identification on them, such as wing tags. So you may see that there are wing tags in a lot of different larger raptor species. But for kestrels who have this uncanny ability to hover, it's really difficult to put wing tags on them because it can actually affect that ability. So the worldwide population is in decline, but they do have an extraordinary wide range. So you can see that the common kestrel is found all across Asia, Europe, and even most of Africa as well. But here in Ireland, they are an amber listed species. And in 2012, it was only estimated that there would be 10,000 individual birds across the island. And we can even see here with the breeding distribution changes from the last BTO bird atlas. So the large grey triangles show loss since 1988 to 1991. And we do know in the 80s that there was an issue with a lot of our birds of prey, especially the smaller birds of prey, with the organochloride pesticides, which is one thing that we found out that there was a problem with peregrine falcons, and then realised that, hang on, this is actually translating across most of our falcons across Britain and Ireland. So we need to figure out what's going on with them if we're going to be able to conserve the species for the future. And to do that, I've got a couple of different questions into the ecology of the kestrel and to investigate their decline. First, I'm really interested in what they might be eating. So on the island of Ireland, we only have 4 species of mammal. We do have 2 invasive species that the bankful has actually just been found in the north over the past couple of weeks. So 2 invasive species of mammal that are coming through, but the one question that I have is maybe kestrels are depending on avian prey instead of mammalian prey. Also looking at pressures from land use change, such as deforestation and agricultural intensification, to see what's happening with the habitat that they need. We know that there are some issues with conifer plantations and agricultural intensification across the island. Is that impacting their prey or their ability to find nests? And with breeding, they don't actually build their own nests, so they rely on corvid stick nests and cavities in old walls and cliffs. And when we pull down those buildings and those old farms, we're actually removing a lot of their breeding space. So the cavities that they are looking for, they're facing competition from jackdaws and peregrine falcons for these nest sites. And the last thing is to look at their range. So what's going on with their range in Ireland? We know that they are found across Europe, Asia, and Africa, but really what's going on with them here in Ireland? So just to give you a brief overview then of what I've been working on for the past couple of years with them, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I have found with their prey. So there are 2 different types of analysis that you can do for raptor diet, and I think most people here will have worked with one or the other. So, excuse me, pellet analysis is something that I'm sure we all collected bird of prey pellets. It's quite exciting, and it's a really great tool of looking at their diet across a range of different habitats. So I did a preliminary analysis on pellets that I collected in 2019. So dissected them as normal, put the remains under a microscope, and then identified them on 3 different levels. So if it was a bird, if it was a mammal, or if it was an insect, across 2 different typical landscapes. You see this is typical agricultural landscape that we have, conifer trees, a lot of fields, built margins, and then we're also finding kestrels in quarries, such as this one. So you can see that they're quite different. And as expected, the prey was quite different. So 71% of the pellets in an agricultural landscape contain birds, and only 59% in quarries. And that's really just to do with the fact that there isn't that much habitat, screen margins, hedgerows in quarries that birds like to be in. And again, not much of a surprise that we had 88% of the pellets in agricultural areas and 59% in quarries that contain mammal. But the one thing that I actually found the most interesting out of all of this was looking at the insects. So we know that kestrels like a wide different range of prey, but the 86% of their diet in quarry landscapes is actually insects, compared to 35% in agricultural areas. And we do know that there are issues with farms in terms of different pesticides, different insecticides, and we know that there's a decline in insects overall worldwide in farming areas, and it was just interesting to see this coming up in pellet analysis as well. The second technique is something that I was really excited to start in the second year of my PhD, and that was DNA analysis. So what we were looking at was when we were ringing young kestrels in the nests, we were swabbing their beaks and their talons for any prey remains that were coming through. And so we took the blood that was on their talons and their beaks, and we did a DNA analysis on that to see if we could determine what their prey was. And the preliminary analysis and the last meal that these guys had was actually a starling. So I thought this was really exciting. And it was something that I was hoping to continue because there's a wide range of kestrel ringers across the island. So we were going to get out, we were going to do swabbing and see if we could build an idea of their prey with this really non-invasive technique. Because we're already ringing them, it's very easy to swab their beaks at the same time. And that was all going to start at the start of this year. So I had great plans of traveling across the island, all of our different kestrel sites, having a look at them, ringing them, and of course getting to hug them because this is clearly the cutest bird of prey I think that you will ever have seen. But then, disaster struck in March, and I think it's a story that's happened with everybody. This year has just been a bit of a mess. So I had to put all of that on hold. So the big data collection and sadly no kestrel hugging for me this year. And I had to switch my focus then and work on what I had instead of worrying about the field work that I wasn't going to be able to do. So I can then start talking a little bit about their distribution in Ireland. So how was I going to do that? How was I going to find this elusive bird of prey that you don't really see anymore? You used to see it on a motorway, but when was the last time you saw one? So I thought, great, let's look at community science, let's look at citizen science, because there's a wide range of people out who are always looking for birds, always bird watching and reporting all of the things that they see. And citizen science is really important. So it's science that is conducted wholly or in part by amateur and non-professional scientists and also professional scientists too. And it's really to do with volunteer monitoring and being out bird watching at different sites. It covers a wide range of different species. It's not just birds, and it's collaborative, it's exciting, and it's vitally useful for people like me who are thinking, where's the kestrels going to be? And most of the raptor data in Ireland is collected by a couple of different places. So in the north, a lot of the data comes through the Northern Ireland Raptor Study Group and through Raptor Monitor as well. But I also got a wealth of information from Birdwatch Ireland and from the BTO Bird Track app, which I highly recommend if you're watching birds that you download, because that data is so important for people like me who are looking for elusive species across the island. And then also my website as well, which is kezarmstrong.com. And through that, I've been collecting sightings from people all across the island and compiled a data set of all the kestrel sightings from the year 2000 to present. But there's a real challenge with this sort of data set because it's opportunistic records. It's citing, I saw a kestrel at this place. And there's can sometimes be quite limited information. So there's a lot of factors to do with citizen work, such as whether you actually report the sighting. So I can't tell you how many times I've been talking about kestrels, and then I've had somebody go, "Oh yeah, I saw one last week." I'm like, "Great, did you report it anywhere, or has it been seen anywhere?" And it's like, "Oh no, I don't think so." So it's getting out and making sure that people know that it's really important that when you see a bird, especially something that's quite elusive or maybe quite rare, that you let one of the bigger organizations know so that we can start to monitor and conserve those species. Also, how many individuals have been sighted? Was it one? Was it two? Was it whole family? There was a sighting that I had in County Antrim a couple of weeks ago that was 4 altogether. So whether you're going to report it, how many individuals were sighted, and then also the detectability of them, because I can tell you from experience so far, kestrels are really, really hard to detect. So sightings are generally reported in places that people like to walk, and you can really see that here when you look at the coast of Dublin here, and also up in the Belfast Hills, Antrim Hills, the North Coast. These are areas that people like to be, areas that people want to spend their time. So it goes without saying that you're more likely to get sightings in areas that people are spending that time. So it's really interesting to look at whether we can start to monitor species in areas that maybe are not so well visited, because potentially there could be or could not be birds of prey in those areas then as well. There's also been several factors that have influenced these sightings. So this graph here just shows you the amount of sightings that we have had since the year 2000. And you can see that there's been dips and flows and also increases as well. And a lot of this is really to do with a lot of different things. So obviously in 2001, we had the foot and mouth crisis across the island. So field work for everybody was cancelled in 2001. So obviously there wasn't going to be very many sightings of any birds or anything that was going on with that. You'll see the sightings increased once BirdTrack was released, which is a collaborative project with the BTO, which is just looking at sighting records and on what birds are seen in which areas, and this runs across the UK and in Ireland. There's a little bit of a dip here in 2010. That was the year of the big freeze, so the winter of the big freeze. So I doubt that any of us were going to be going out and looking for birds when most of us were snowed in across the country. You can also see an increase here in around 2013, 2014, and that's when BirdTrack released its phone app, which I highly recommend you all download because it's very easy to use and it's a great tool to be able to just quickly say, this is where I've seen a bird, and all the different things that you have seen with that. And then there was a bit of a decrease in kestrel sightings, and I don't know whether it's just that the population has declined rapidly in the past 5-6 years, or whether it was a case of people just weren't reporting when they saw them. But you can see that there is a large increase in sightings whenever my PhD started, and I started shouting about kestrels and asking people to report sightings whenever they saw them. And then there's this year. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how COVID is going to have affected the sightings. I'll definitely have a little bit more of an idea towards the end of the year, but you can already see that there is a bit of a lull just in sighting records, and that's because we've all been under restrictions and not allowed to leave our homes or go 5 kilometers away from home. So yeah, it's been an interesting year, I think, all around for that. But it's also really interesting to see exactly where the sightings are coming from. So this graph as well is just showing you that the vast majority of the sightings, which is the grey bars here, are coming from BirdTrack. And I know I've said it before, and I'll definitely say it, I think, at least twice more in this presentation, but it is a fantastic resource for recording all of your sightings, and you can see just how important BirdTrack has been for kestrel sightings across the island. You can also see that there's a large increase again, 2018, 2019, 2020, and that's whenever I started shouting about my PhD, things that were going on. And you can see that there's sighting records that are coming through the Raptor study group, and then also social media and my website, which is the yellow bars here as well. And we can also glean a lot of really good information from this. So it's not just a case of how many sightings have been seen, but actually the time that they are being seen as well. So we know certain things about kestrels, like when they come back for their nesting sites and when they're leaving their nesting sites. And you can see that they're returning to their nest sites March and April, and that's actually when they are more likely to be seen. Is it because the male and the female are coming together? They sky dance, very similar to hen harriers. It might not be as pretty as hen harriers, although I think it's better. And they're coming together, they're reaffirming their bonds before they start nesting. And then you can see that the sightings dip and in the middle of May, June, July, and this is obviously because they're sitting on their nests. So whenever the female is on her nest, she doesn't get up off it. The male will deliver food to her, so you're only really going to see a male in May, June, July. And then there's also a high increase in October, November, and this is really to do with dispersal. And it's not just the dispersal of the young birds, but it's also the dispersal of the adults. So the adults don't stay at their nest sites in the winter. For the vast majority of them, they're heading towards the coast, although we're not exactly sure at what point they're heading towards the coast or areas that they are liking to hang out in winter. And it's definitely something that I'm starting to look into now with the sightings records to see if we can assess if there's a difference in habitat type between summer and winter sightings. And you can also see then as well that although you're going to get an opportunistic sighting record, you're not always going to find out if it's a male, a female, or a juvenile. And again, it was really 2018, 2019, whenever I arrived on the scene, that you can see that there's a massive jump in identification of the sex or the age of kestrels. So if you do see one, report it. I don't mind if you don't know, but if you do know if it's a male or a female or a juvenile, it's really important for us to be able to have a look at that. So you can see that roughly 10% of all of the sightings that I've collected from the year 2000, we can identify individual birds then from that. And we can also use sightings to have an idea of what's going on really with their habitat and their habitat choice. So we know that kestrels are generally seen as a bird of agricultural landscape. You know, you think of them as a farmland bird. It's a farmland bird that predates in farmland pests, and that's generally what we have thought about them for as long as we've been thinking about kestrels. But using sightings of them, we can have a look at areas where they're hunting, because that's usually what the sighting will be. Kestrels hovering, kestrels being seen, and these are the areas that they're hunting for prey. So the grey bar here is agriculture, which is our typical area that we would expect to see them. And yeah, it features really heavily in sightings across the island. vast majority of birds are seen in agriculture. But again, not a massive surprise because the vast majority of the island is agriculture. So you can take from that really what you will, but you can also see that the coast is very important, and that's because a lot of the nest sites are actually in coastal areas. So they're nesting on cliff sides, very similar to peregrine falcons, and also hunting in those areas. And then in the winter, that's where we think they're disappearing to. Forests as well, which is this little blue bar. So we know that they like to nest in conifer. Contentious subject. We'll not go into conifer plantations too much in this talk, but kestrels do enjoy it because they will find good nest sites, that old stick nests in these areas, and they're able to use them for breeding. And then freshwater as well, I thought was quite an interesting one. So it definitely the start of 2000, between 2000 and 2005, was a lot more important for them. Kind of has tailed off a little bit, but whether they're finding it easier to find food in these areas is something that I'm going to start to look into. And urban environments actually really surprised me because I don't think of a kestrel as a bird of an urban environment. If you ask me about an urban bird of prey, I'm going to say something like a peregrine falcon, or maybe a buzzard. So you don't really see kestrels near a lot of the towns and the cities in this island, but definitely interested in the urban environments. And this includes things like football pitches, green spaces. It's not necessarily just housing developments, industrial areas. They seem to like that, and I think maybe it's because prey is easier to find in these areas as well. So using this kind of data, we can start to build up a really good idea of what habitat is important for kestrels, what type of habitat has a considerable effect on their population, and then also how we can start to maintain these different types of land for conservation strategy in the future. So sighting data is actually really exciting and really interesting as well. So thanks very much, guys, for bringing in all your sightings for that. And with this as well, we can actually have a look at the best possible areas that we're going to see them. So the simplest approach for using this kind of opportunistic sighting data is just to assume that the distribution is completely random. So that the average chance of you seeing a kestrel doesn't actually change over time. And by using this, we can then start to think about the probability of the persistence of a species. So are you more likely or less likely to see it in different areas? So this is a map of a kernel density estimator. It sounds very exciting, and it is. And this just shows us a little bit of the areas that we think we should be able to find kestrels. So yeah, I mean, the East Coast tends to be quite good, but generally fairly widespread across the island. And one question that I'm actually asked all the time whenever I'm talking about kestrels is usually something to do with buzzards then as well. Are you more likely to see a kestrel or in areas that there are buzzards? Are you less likely to see a kestrel? And I thought that I would preempt this question a little bit and do the same map, but with buzzard sightings from the BTO. And interestingly enough, then kestrels and buzzards tend to be found in the same areas on the island. So I actually don't think that buzzards have had a really big issue on kestrels or kestrel sightings here, but it's obviously something that I do really want to look into and see if we can figure it out. My main worry, I think, for kestrels whenever I'm talking about specific predators or other birds is actually the arguments that they have to have with a lot of different birds. So they're directly competing with barn owl, for example, because barn owl are eating the same food. 95% of barn owl diet and kestrel diet is going to be small mammals. We only have 4 species of native small mammal in the country. So they're already directly competing for food source. And I already alluded as well to corvids, so kestrels don't build their own nests, so they're directly competing for old stick nests from things like magpies and crows. And also they're going to be competing with them because magpies and crows could come into those nests and eat kestrel eggs and kestrel young. And I'm not sure if anyone will have seen this video, but I really love including it because I think it's fascinating. So this is a hen harrier nest, which is a ground nesting bird, and you can see that this is a female kestrel coming in to try and predate the nest. And I don't know about any of you, I just don't think that going into a hen harrier nest would be my first choice for finding food. I think my money would definitely be on the harrier, but in that case, it was actually on the kestrel. So you can take from that what you will. It's definitely interesting to surmise that there are a wide range of issues facing these birds across the island, in terms of food, habitat, places to live, and obviously just where they're being seen then as well. So let's see if I can go here. So the next steps for me then is actually to start looking at a more standardized survey. So opportunistic sightings have been really important because they're giving me a very good overview of the distribution of kestrel here and the different habitat that they like, and where it's going to be easier to find them. But I'm going to start using data collected from the breeding bird survey in the north and the countryside bird survey in the south, and put those together, and start to look at presence absence records. And I think that that's going to be a really great way to build up a picture of how their population has been since the year 2000, and what their population has been doing in the time since, and what's going on now. But the reason that I'm focusing so much on sighting records is because kestrels are actually really rarely seen in these BBS surveys. And a lot of this is to do with the fact that they're rarely seen during the incubation period. So the 29 to 30 days incubation period, female's sitting on the nest and she's not moving. The male's coming back and forth delivering food. So very unlikely to be seen. But also we really need to step up a lot of the monitoring that we have, because there's quite a lot of the island that isn't covered in these surveys yet. It's just something that I'm going to shout about. So you might see me shouting about it pretty soon, but I'm going to use the data that we have to try and figure out what their population has really been doing over the past little while. So that's the next step. Very busy winter, and then hopefully the pandemic is going to calm down and we'll all be allowed out of our houses again, and I'll be allowed to travel around the country, ringing birds, looking at kestrels, talking to all of the amazing raptor volunteers that are dotted about everywhere. And also, I really don't need an excuse to go and spend a couple of weeks in Galway. So it's that's hopefully the plan from March onwards. So fingers crossed, no pandemic for me, and I'll be able to get out and continue the diet analysis and the DNA analysis, which is something I'm most excited about. So it's really a call to get involved. So many of you I know have been reporting your sightings, and thank you so much. It's massively appreciated. But just another call to continue to report your sightings, and not just about kestrels. Obviously, they're my favorite, but all of our raptors, you know. And if you report them all, then we're going to be able to build a lot of really good information about the different habitat that they like and where they're found. So you can report them to the Raptor Study Group in the north, but also Birdwatch Ireland in the south, and BirdTrack as well. Download it, you'll not regret it. It's a great app. Even just to be a bird nerd, to be like, hey, guess what? I saw this glossy ibis yesterday, you know, and it's a nice little thing for bragging rights with your friends then as well. And also volunteer to monitor a nest. That's something that I think is really exciting, because most raptor ecologists, there is only one person generally looking at the moment on kestrels in the north especially, and monitoring nests with a big group of volunteers. That sounds pretty good. So yeah, if you're looking to get out next year and you live nearby to a nest, it'd be great to have more people on board just to have a look at timing of things, so timing of eggs and timing of chicks. It will make field work much easier as well, and you get to look at kestrels, which is never a bad thing, I think, for anybody. And I wanted to kind of draw this to a close with this quote that I found, because my PhD so far has actually been completely dependent on citizen science. So I just wanted to say that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I do honestly believe that the sighting records are going to change the future of kestrels in Ireland, because we will be able to assess them, which we've never really been able to do before in such a wide range. So thank you to everybody for every single sighting that you have reported to me, to Birdwatch Ireland, to BTO, to the Raptor Study Groups, and even just on Twitter, which has been brilliant, the amount of people that are sharing their photos in the areas that they're seeing these birds. So I do have a very long list of people to thank, but I just want to have a special thanks for my supervisors, which Paul and Mark, who have been great, because I came in to Queen's to actually do a PhD in butterflies in orchards, thinking, oh, sure, they've got wings, it's fine, I can totally do that. And they've been brilliant in listening to my whims about raptors and letting me build this PhD on kestrels. And I think that it's been really important, because we're just learning so much about them every day. And then another video, because I think if you didn't already love kestrels, you probably will now. And that's really it from me. So I just want to say thank you so much to everybody for coming in. I'm more than happy to spend the rest of the evening taking questions, although I think I've only got a little while to do that. And also Merry Christmas.